The glittering lights of a television studio can often mask a pressure cooker of clashing ideologies, personal animosities, and the relentless drive for ratings. For decades, daytime television has served as a cultural barometer, a place where the collective anxieties and debates of a nation are played out in real time before millions of viewers sitting in their living rooms. It is a unique medium where the boundary between political discourse and personal theater is perpetually blurred, and where a single commercial break can separate a calm discussion from an absolute rhetorical explosion. Within this landscape, few platforms have generated as much conversation, controversy, and raw emotion as the iconic roundtable of daytime talk shows, where a panel of strong-willed commentators gathers daily to dissect the latest events. To understand the true weight of the modern media landscape, one must look closely at how these daily broadcasts shape public perception. And we invite you to join our growing community by subscribing to this channel to stay updated on all our deep dives into the media world. The dynamics of these programs rely entirely on contrast, pitting different life experiences and philosophies against each other in a format that demands quick wit, sharp tongues, and an unwavering willingness to stand one's ground. When that delicate balance is upset, or when the underlying tension between the participants boils over, the resulting fallout can echo across the media landscape for days, capturing the attention of millions and sparking intense debates about the nature of civil discourse. To truly appreciate the intensity of the latest television confrontation, it is essential to look back at the history of the personalities who have defined this specific daytime battleground over the last decade. The circular table has long been a lightning rod for ideological friction, particularly during eras of intense national debate when every sentence uttered on screen is scrutinized by both supporters and critics. For several years, the presence of a lone conservative voice on a predominantly liberal panel created a fascinating, if frequently combustible, viewing experience that came to define the program's identity. This individual was tasked with representing an entire spectrum of political thought against a unified front of seasoned broadcasters, leading to daily skirmishes that often felt less like a structured debate and more like a gladiatorial arena. The toll of such an environment extends far beyond what the cameras captured during the live broadcast, influencing personal lives and emotional states of everyone involved long after the studio lights are turned off. It is an environment where professional disagreements can easily mutate into deeply personal grievances, creating long-lasting rifts that remain unresolved even years after a participant has permanently walked away from the set. The memory of those past television battles provides the essential context for the explosive reactions that still occur when the program tackles highly charged topics with prominent national figures. The legacy of a former panelist who spent 4 turbulent years defending her worldview against a chorus of opposition continues to cast a long shadow over the broadcast. Her departure did not signal an end to the friction. Rather, it cemented a narrative of a deeply divided workplace that she would later describe in harrowing detail within the pages of her personal memoir. She characterized the atmosphere as a toxic environment where the pressure was constant and the support was minimal, a place where a single sharp comment from a colleague could lead to backstage tears and physical distress. This history of internal strife sets the stage for how current broadcasts are perceived by former insiders, who watch from a distance with a mix of familiar exhaustion and sharp criticism, waiting for the moment when the current hosts inevitably clash with a guest from the opposite side of the spectrum, when a prominent national political figure currently serving at the highest levels of governance was announced as a guest for a recent Tuesday morning broadcast. Viewers and media analysts alike knew that a calm conversation was entirely out of the question. The stage was set for a classic daytime television ambush, a situation where a lone visitor must navigate a minefield of hostile inquiries from a panel that has spent years refining its collective approach to adversarial interviewing. The anticipation built rapidly as the public waited to see how the visitor would handle the predictable onslaught, and whether the current lineup of hosts would maintain professional decorum or allow the segment to devolve into a chaotic shouting match. For the former conservative panelist watching from home, the upcoming broadcast represented a perfect test of whether the program had learned anything from its past controversies, or if it remained trapped in the same patterns of undisciplined behavior and factual errors that had defined her own difficult tenure on the series. As the morning broadcast commenced and the special guest took his seat at the famous table, the atmosphere in the studio instantly shifted, crackling with an undeniable static of mutual distrust and ideological opposition. The hosts, a group of veteran broadcasters who have anchored the program through countless cultural shifts, wasted no time in establishing a tone of aggressive skepticism. The interview was ostensibly arranged to discuss the guest's newly released book, a deeply personal memoir exploring themes of faith and spiritual growth. But it was clear from the very first minute that the panel had far different priorities. The traditional pleasantries were discarded in favor of immediate, high-stakes confrontation, turning what could have been a nuanced discussion about personal philosophy into a chaotic cross-examination that tested the limits of live television production. Watching this scene unfold from afar, the former token conservative could not contain her frustration, seeing a vivid reflection of the very dynamics that had made her own time on the show so agonizing. The spectacle of multiple hosts speaking over a guest, interrupting responses, and failing to adhere to basic journalistic discipline triggered a passionate response that she immediately shared with the public. To her eyes, the broadcast was a perfect demonstration of why the show continues to alienate large segments of the audience, revealing a persistent lack of control and an inability to conduct a fair interview without descending into emotional outbursts. The irony of the situation was compounded by the fact that nearly a year prior, she had conducted a remarkably warm and friendly interview with the guest's spouse on her own independent platform, highlighting a massive contrast in approach and civility. As the television segment rapidly veered toward total acrimony, the tension between the host's aggressive tactics and the guest's determination to remain calm created a captivating piece of media drama, leaving the audience to wonder exactly how far the panel would go in their attempt to dismantle the arguments of the man sitting across from them. The immediate transition from a promotional book interview to a high-stakes political cross-examination occurred within mere moments of the prominent guest taking his seat at the center of the panel. The visitor, a seasoned political figure, celebrating the launch of his 304-page spiritual memoir, focusing on personal faith and resilience through the various seasons of life, found himself facing an immediate barrage of critical inquiries that had nothing to do with literature. The tone was set by a prominent anti-Trump panelist who aggressively challenged the guest's previous assertions regarding the economic trajectory of the country and the current administration's handling of national inflation. When the guest attempted to offer a measured perspective on the complex factors driving consumer costs and economic recovery, his explanation was swiftly cut off by competing voices around the table, establishing a pattern of rapid-fire interruptions that would characterize the entire hour. The guest remained remarkably diplomatic and soft-spoken, choosing to carefully dissect the accusations rather than matching the rising volume of his questioners, a tactic that visibly contrasted with the frantic energy of the broadcasting panel around him. As the segment progressed, the inquiries shifted from standard economic policy to far more sensitive and sensational topics, specifically targeting legal investigations and high-profile criminal files that have captured public fascination for years. One of the co-hosts pressed the guest intensely regarding an alleged request made the previous summer to federal officials involving a controversial media figure and a notorious federal inmate associated with a high-profile sex trafficking ring. The panelist demanded to know why federal authorities had supposedly rebuffed his suggestions regarding an interview that was intended to clear the name of the administration's leader. The guest handled the highly provocative question by advising the audience against believing every report published in the media, regardless of whether a publication leaned to the political right or the political left. He candidly described himself as a bit of a conspiracy theorist regarding the broader details of that specific criminal network, emphasizing how deeply unsettling it was that a known predator had maintained such extensive connections with wealthy and powerful individuals across the globe. The debate grew increasingly rancorous as the guest pushed for full transparency regarding the remaining millions of pages of documents held by the Department of Justice, pointing out that public records clearly demonstrated an intense mutual animosity between the notorious financier and the president. He reminded the panel that the president had actually reported the individual to law enforcement authorities years prior, an assertion that was instantly met with fierce pushback from the more liberal members of the group. One host loudly insisted that the two men had been close personal friends for an entire decade, while another claimed that their relationship had only dissolved due to a failed real estate transaction in Florida. When pressed for specific details and legal citations regarding the ongoing holdup of federal records, the host questioning him was unable to provide exact references. leading the guest to calmly state that he would need to know precisely what she was talking about before he could offer a comprehensive response. The rising tension and overlapping arguments forced the main moderator to abruptly call for a commercial break to restore order to the chaotic live broadcast upon returning from the commercial interruption. The atmosphere in the studio remained heavily charged, and the panel immediately launched into an exploration of the guest's dramatic political evolution over the past decade. A co-host asked a pointed question regarding how the visitor's conversion from Protestantism to Catholicism had influenced his shifting political alliances, specifically referencing highly critical messages he had sent to a friend back in 2016 compared to his current role as a champion for the administration. The guest responded with an appeal for humility, stating that when a person makes public predictions that turn out to be completely incorrect, it is necessary to look inward and evaluate what they misunderstood or failed to appreciate about the situation. He explained that true growth in both life and politics requires an individual to admit when they were wrong. Acknowledging that the president had ultimately proven to be a highly successful leader for the country despite initial doubts, this philosophical explanation did not satisfy the panel, who quickly diverted the conversation away from personal growth to launch a sustained critique of the administration's sweeping immigration policies and border management strategies. Multiple hosts began speaking simultaneously, tossing a variety of complex accusations regarding border enforcement, humanitarian concerns, and executive orders into a single 30-second window. The guest calmly noted the sheer volume of topics being thrown at him with very little time left in the segment, prompting the moderator to attempt to steer the show toward another pre-scheduled commercial break. However, other panelists refused to let the matter drop, arguing that because of his high-ranking political status, the segment should be allowed to run past its scheduled time constraints. The guest attempted to articulate a balanced view on immigration, emphasizing the necessity of enforcing national laws while ensuring that the process does not dehumanize individuals seeking a better life. Despite his efforts to provide a nuanced answer, he was continuously interrupted, with an unsatisfied panelist demanding immediate answers to multiple rapidly delivered follow-up questions before the network finally cut away from the desk. The final portion of the intensive interview saw the discussion take an even more personal turn as the moderator confronted the guest directly about racial dynamics and civil rights in the United States. The panel accused the administration of actively stigmatizing and denigrating communities of color through the systematic removal of historical structures, the alteration of majority-minority voting districts, and the sidelining of prominent minority leaders. The moderator explicitly brought the guest's own diverse family into the conversation, noting that his wife is an Indian American and asking how he could personally tolerate policies that allegedly erased the history of minority heroes who had worked tirelessly to achieve the American dream. The guest appeared visibly confused by the sweeping nature of the accusation, directly asking the panel what specific policies or events they were referring to, which caused the moderator to momentarily trip over her words while trying to explain her stance on how national history was being handled. The exchange rapidly deteriorated into a fundamental disagreement over facts and societal progress, with a co-host stepping in to assert that minority history was being intentionally erased from classrooms and public spaces across the country. The guest firmly rejected this narrative, stating unequivocally that every single individual is entirely welcome within their political coalition and within the country, provided they are a citizen of the United States. To support his argument regarding the positive impact of the administration's local policies, he cited recent statistical data showing a significant decline in violent crime rates within the nation's capital, a city with a very large minority population. This statistical defense was immediately rebuffed by the moderator, who fired back that the issue was not a matter of criminal statistics, but rather a fundamental question of human rights, while another host maintained her stance that history was actively being erased. The guest firmly responded that such accusations were simply not correct, but his final defense was cut short yet again by the loud cue for another commercial break, leaving the audience to process a masterclass in modern television friction. The concluding segment of this remarkably turbulent television appearance allowed for a brief cooling of the rhetorical temperature, as the broadcast finally transitioned to the softer topics that usually dominate daytime talk formats. With the heavy political sparring over economic policy, judicial records, and civil rights finally drawn to a close, The guest was permitted a few uninterrupted moments to discuss his personal journey and the thematic core of his new literary work. The book itself represents a significant departure from standard political manifestos, offering readers a deeply contemplative look into the internal mechanics of faith and personal transformation. For a figure who has lived so much of his adult life in the blinding glare of the public eye, the text serves as an intimate chronicle of finding a sense of stable grounding amidst the chaotic winds of national prominence. The final minutes of the broadcast featured lighter questions regarding his daily routines, his family life, and the ways in which his spiritual convictions help him navigate the immense pressures of serving at the highest echelons of American governance. Yet, despite the lighter tone of these closing moments, the memory of the preceding hour hung heavily over the set, illustrating the vast chasm that exists between the quiet reflection of a spiritual life and the performative combat of modern media. This high-profile television encounter matters immensely because it offers a stark, unfiltered window into the systemic fragmentation of contemporary public discourse in the United States. When a simple book promotion transforms into a chaotic, multi-front ideological battlefield, it reveals how difficult it has become for opposing political factions to engage in even a rudimentary exchange of ideas without the conversation collapsing into mutual recrimination and shouting matches. The broadcast underscored a growing trend in modern media where the primary goal of an interview often shifts from a desire to understand a guest's perspective to an intense effort to trap, dismantle, or publicly embarrass them. For the millions of citizens watching at home, such spectacles do little to clarify complex national issues. Instead, they deepen pre-existing societal divisions and reinforce the widespread belief that mainstream media platforms are designed to generate high-stakes drama rather than foster genuine public understanding. The immense fallout from this single hour of television echoes far beyond the studio walls, serving as a case study for media analysts and historians studying the rapid degradation of civil debate in the digital age. To fully comprehend the deep personal animosities that fueled this specific television confrontation, one must examine the remarkable journeys of the individuals involved, particularly the complex legacy of the former conservative panelist who watched the broadcast with such sharp criticism. As the daughter of a legendary national senator and war hero, she entered the world of daytime television carrying a profound sense of legacy and an unyielding commitment to her family's political traditions. Her 4-year tenure on the program was defined by a profound sense of isolation, as she found herself operating as the solitary defender of conservative principles against an established, deeply unified group of liberal co-hosts. This ideological asymmetry turned every single morning broadcast into an exhausting psychological test, where the boundary between professional debate and personal attack was crossed on a regular basis. The emotional toll of this environment culminated in her dramatic departure and the subsequent publication of her memoir, a book that pulled back the curtain on what she described as a fundamentally hostile and toxic workplace designed to break the spirit of anyone who dared to dissent from the prevailing consensus. Her passionate defense of the guest's performance on the show is inextricably linked to this personal history of studio warfare, as she clearly viewed his treatment through the lens of her own past suffering at the hands of the very same hosts. She saw in his calm, measured responses a masterclass in how to survive a daytime television ambush, a feat she felt she was rarely able to achieve during her own highly emotional battles on the set. The striking contrast between the hostile reception the politician received on the program and the remarkably warm, empathetic interview she had conducted with his spouse on her independent podcast nearly a year prior highlights two completely different philosophies of media engagement. While the daytime talk show relied on conflict, interruption, and rhetorical trapdoors to generate viral moments, her own platform sought to build bridges through shared human experiences, focusing heavily on the universal bonds of motherhood, family values, and the unique challenges of raising children under the relentless scrutiny of the national spotlight. The host panel itself is comprised of individuals whose own long-standing broadcasting careers have made them formidable figures in American popular culture, each bringing a distinct style and a fiercely loyal audience to the table. From the Academy Award-winning moderator who has steered the program through decades of cultural shifts, to the veteran comedic voice known for her sharp, unfiltered takedowns, the group functions as a tightly coordinated unit during high-stakes political segments. Their collective approach to interviewing conservative guests has been refined over years of live broadcasting, relying on a rapid-fire rotation of questions designed to keep visitors on the defensive and prevent them from delivering polished talking points. However, as this latest interview demonstrated, this aggressive strategy can occasionally backfire, turning what should be a rigorous journalistic inquiry into an undisciplined display of overlapping voices and factual vulnerabilities that can be easily exploited by a disciplined, media-savvy politician. Ultimately, the intense drama surrounding this Tuesday morning broadcast serves as a powerful reminder of the delicate, often precarious relationship between politics and entertainment in the modern era. As the guest left the studio to continue his national book tour, the ripples of his appearance continued to expand across social media platforms, igniting furious debates among supporters who praised his poise and critics who accused him of dodging critical accountability. The event stands as a defining milestone in the ongoing evolution of daytime television, proving that even within a format traditionally dedicated to light-hearted lifestyle topics and celebrity gossip, the deep ideological fractures of the nation will always find a way to break through the surface. The enduring image of a lone political leader calmly asking for a tiny bit of humility amidst a chorus of shouting hosts will likely remain a focal point of media